How does a fly score revenge? Why did the chicken cross the road? And what kind of adventure lays an egg? It's time to dial up the old school love as we get ready to break down the best classic console games of all time right here, right now on Filter. Hello, I'm Diane Mizota, and welcome to Filter. A hand-picked top 10 video game countdown is voted on by you, the viewer, at G4TV.com. Everybody remembers their first time, and whether it was an Atari 2600 in television or any one of a number of old-school home consoles, the day you finally got your hands on one is the day that your life would change forever. And although the classic games that dominated your early days of play are now nothing more than sweet pieces of nostalgia tucked away in the happy cracks of your brain, their importance will never be forgotten. That's why today we're here at the Classic Gaming Expo in Las Vegas, so that we can pay respect to the games that got us started. But before we get started on the countdown, let's hear a few people reminisce about the good old games.
I'd say some of the major games that helped gaming move from the arcades to the home were the Miyamoto creations like Donkey Kong and Mario Brothers.
You could say that coin-op conversions were the thing that helped games move from the arcade to the home. But there were some games that stood out, I think, games that were not really coin-op conversions, but games that stood on their own and distinguished the 2600.
Went to Atari with the idea of building a device to connect to your home TV that would let you play the arcade games in the home. And that first game was Pong.
My first console game was an Atari 2600.
Like a lot of people in my age, it would have been a Christmas present.
Got an Atari 2600 for Christmas.
I was at home on Christmas Day playing Air-Sea Battle. That was the game that came with the original Sears telegames. We didn't get Combat. All my other friends had Combat.
What you describe as an old school game was really the state-of-the-art in technology at the time that it existed. You had to concentrate on gameplay. The game had to be fun or you weren't going to try to sell it.
Okay, before we begin, let me eliminate all confusion by pointing out that today's countdown is limited to games that got their start in the home market. That's why you won't see any games like Pac-Man or Dig Dug. You will, however, see games like Mega Mania. Matter of fact, you'll see that one right now because the Space Invaders style shooter starts our countdown at number 10.
Mega Mania, good game from Activision. It was real manic, one of the Space Invaders kind of game, but things went from left to right and everything up and down and stuff like that.
What really made the game unique was that the objects on screen were common items that you may encounter in your daily existence. So we're talking like flying bow ties, flying tires, unusual funny objects.
Space Nightmare, it's basically a shooter. It's kind of a Space Invaders Galaxian-inspired type of deal.
A lot like Galaxian, except cooler.
Good graphics, better than it was average on the Atari 2600 at the time.
While the tires in Mega Mania were out to get you, the tires in our next game were out to get you there ahead of the pack. In Enduro, you were a race car driver in the National Enduro, a long-distance road race, and you had to pass a certain amount of cars each day on your way to capturing the checkered flag. Sure, games like Turbo and Pole Position were more fun, but you couldn't play those at home, could you? Enduro grabs the 9th spot.
Enduro, good racing game, smoother graphics and scrolling and everything than the other driving games for the 2600. And of course, traditional Activision style was high quality, good gameplay.
The designer was a nuclear physicist, I believe, and he designed 2 games, and we've never heard from him since.
You were racing at night, you were racing on the ice, you were racing in the rain. That part made it interesting, and it was always challenging. Great way to waste large amounts of time on a good driving game.
When H.E.R.O was first released in 1983, Activision offered a membership to the Roadbusters Club and a free patch to anyone who could survive for 5 or more days. But if you were a real hero back then, you didn't need no freaking patch. All you needed was a copy of our next game and a buttload of free time. Take a look at rescuer extraordinaire Roderick H.E.R.O in the game at number 8, H.E.R.O.
The most interesting thing in H.E.R.O has to be that it was actually a vertical maze. So to do that, of course, the character had to be equipped with a helicopter backpack to be able to go up and down.
Best Atari 2600 game ever. Best ever. It's a phenomenal game. Tons of things to explore. Very challenging. Way ahead of its time. Really, really advanced game that stands up today against whatever you can put out, on Xbox, Dreamcast, anything.
A little FYI, H.E.R.O actually stands for Helicopter Emergency Rescue Operation. A little more FYI for you, I still have my old home console, an Atari 2600. What about you? When we come back from the break, we'll find out what happened to your gateways to gaming. Plus, we'll keep counting down till we crown the classic king. Can a road-crossing chicken muster up the courage to grab a victory, or will he get caught in the crosshairs of combat? Find out when Filter returns. Welcome back to Filter. I'm Diane Mizota here at the Classic Gaming Expo, counting down the best classic console games of all time. The rankings for Filter shows come directly from the responses you post on the G4 website. To make your vote count, log on to g4tv.com/filter and select the filterator. Then choose a category, vote on a scale of 1 to 10, and we'll take care of the rest. While you're there, be sure to post your suggestions for topics and games you'd like to see covered in future episodes. Let's get back to our 10-to-1 adventure with the game at number 7, Adventure. The Atari Classic lands on the countdown for 2 simple reasons. It's the first RPG-ish game ever, and it also had the first Easter egg ever. But here are a few more reasons, just to keep it real.
Adventure was a game that launched a genre, and that's what made it so significant. It was very simple. It was a 2K game. And
at Atari, Warren Robinette looked at the 2600 and said, I think I can make this, an adventure-like game on the 2600. He tried to put a dragon in the game.
The dragon kind of looks like a duck.
And with the limited graphics, the dragon ended up looking kind of like a duck.
It's all about the dot, about the sword, and about spearing the duck. What else is there to do?
Talk about defining the 2600 in its own right, creating a new genre and doing it adventure. Super significant game, I think. Good choice.
You looking for a real adventure? Try being a chicken and making your way across 10 lanes of screaming vehicular mayhem without getting turned into a poultry pancake. If you play the game at number 6, you know exactly how hard and how much fun that could be. Here's Freeway.
Freeway, avoiding the cars with a chicken, which I think was inspired with David Crane going to Lakeshore Drive in Chicago.
I looked at that and I said, well, there's an idea for a video game. Guy trying to get across 10 lanes of traffic. We had a little bit of a problem. What happens when a man gets struck by a car? Jim Levy, president of Activision at the time, he said, hey, I got an idea, turn it into a chicken, and we'll tell the story of the chicken crossing the road. In the last 24 hours of the development process, I turned the man into a little yellow chicken.
Freeway made its way onto many Atari consoles back in the day, but where are Ataris now? We asked a few people what happened to their old video game systems, and here's what they told us.
I have no idea. The first 20, the Atari 2600 I have now is probably at the bottom of a landfill somewhere.
I could not tell you because I sold it at a garage sale. It's probably at the dump.
Might be in a landfill.
Unfortunately, I don't have my first console ever. It's before eBay was around, so I'm guessing someone picked it up in Pennsylvania someplace and is using it as toilet paper.
My first console, like the Atari 2600 game console, I actually have that on a shelf in my office, along with every game I ever did in shrink-wrap form.
My first console, the Atari 2600, is sitting on my living room shelf.
My first console is on a shelf in my office.
Well, my first console, now that went in a garage sale sometime during the Reagan administration.
I have the first Atari 2600 that came off the assembly line. And they're in my game room.
I still have the first console, and I probably have about 25 other consoles to add with that first console. So it's collecting dust, right? No, I use my console.
Okay, I may still have my Atari, but unfortunately, I have no idea what happened to the crazy cool paddles that came with the game at number 5. Back in the day, Kaboom was the ultimate reflex game. You had a trio of water buckets, and you had to slide them from left to right in order to catch a battery of bombs released by who else? The Mad Bomber. That was no small task, but in the end, it was still definitely the bomb.
Kaboom. Oh, talk about a real manic game. That's, you know, you got the little bomber dropping bombs down on you. Got to catch them in your water bucket.
Really fun game. Fundamental, basic, simple mechanic that just gets more and more intense.
And, you know, after the 9th level or so, the pace gets very, very, very frenetic.
It's a game where people often describe that they go into the zone, and if you don't find the zone, you can't win the game.
Kaboom makes your eyes water. You definitely have to focus in on your buckets. I would suggest staring in the center of the screen and doing a delay reaction as to how the bombs are dropped. Because if you don't follow this, you will die quickly.
More than just the game at number 5, Kaboom was also a sound heard early and often in the very first Atari 2600 game ever made. And to own a 2600 was to own that very game because combat came packaged with each and every Atari sold. When it came to starter kits, there simply was nothing that could touch this 2-player game of one-on-one combat with tanks, planes, and jet fighters. The original fighter blows up the 4 spot.
Probably one of my first experiences playing a video game at home was Combat Tanks on the Atari. And the only reason I remember that is because I used to love G.I. Joes, and the fact that I actually got to shoot things out of the tanks was a big thing for me.
It's a wonderful way for 2 people to go head-to-head. It's a dueling battle. It's planes against planes, tanks against tanks. 2 people enter, 1 person exits.
One of the neat little tricks I used to do back in the old days was to secretly switch the difficulty switch on them, you know, and make it more difficult to make their tank or plane move slower and see how long it took them to notice.
There's no way we could overlook combat for the countdown, but there were a few other worthy titles that just missed the top 10. We'll take a look at some of those when we come back, plus we'll keep counting them down till we get to number 1. Will the river raid the top spot, or will a pitfall swallow it up? Stick around and find out when Filter returns. Back to Filter. I'm Diane Mizota, and we're back at the Classic Gaming Expo in Las Vegas, where we're counting down the best classic console games of all time. With 7 down and 3 up, let's catch up before we wrap up with a quick recap. Mega Mania slides into the 10th spot. H.E.R.O crosses the finish line in 9th place. Your H.E.R.O finishes in 8th. Adventure unlocks a 7th place finish. The Chicken crossed the road so that Freeway could grab the 6th spot. Kabooyah! Kaboom is the bomb at number 5. And it may have been a freebie, but combat has more than enough fight to wind up in 4th. Speaking of fights, here's one that takes place above ground. River Raid put you in the pilot seat of a B-1 Stratowing assault jet and sent you into the heat of combat over the hazardous river of no return. Perhaps it wasn't the most original game in the world, but it was a hell of a good time. Plus, it was developed by a woman, so hell yeah. The Atari air shooter comes in 3rd.
River Raid is the granddaddy of all like shooter games.
River Raid is your raid you're pulling all the way down the river, where you're climbing up this snaking river and you are facing, you know, flak and various challenges. Things are jumping up to get you, and you've got to be shooting or bombing things as you're moving along.
With the possibility of running out of fuel. So you have to run the fuel tanks over to gain your fuel to continue.
You know, pretty basic concept, but there was just enough variety in it to keep it interesting.
It was kind of a simple game, blowing up bridges with your plane.
River Raid notched itself a spot in the countdown, but the games you're about to see weren't as lucky. Here's a look at a few titles that got filtered out.
Flag capture. You have a field of squares, one of which has a flag. Okay? The goal is to be the first one to get to the flag. But this was something where you're competing with another person, but the goal is not just to get them, the goal is to use your environment and read the signals and do all that. There was more to it.
I would add Frostbite to that list. Frostbite is another game that kept you on your toes, where you jumped across floating icebergs, avoiding crabs and collecting fish to gain your points. Your object was to build an igloo and then hide in the igloo from the attacking bear.
Now that we've paid our respects to a few veterans that got overlooked, let's pay some props to the best-looking vet on the block. Your 2 favorite classic console games are H.E.R.O's Revenge and Pitfall, and that's no surprise. H.E.R.O's Revenge was a super original shooter which had Atari fans jamming that little red fire button for days on end. While Pitfall kept you going and going until you finally reached the end, it's considered to be the first real platforming game ever. But only one of these games can be best classic console game ever. And you know what that means. It's time to sit down and strap in as Shooter takes on Swinger in another filter face-off.
H.E.R.O's Revenge was a space action game with a whole science fiction story upon which it was predicated that I heard the programmer wrote himself, actually.
You know, I would probably pick H.E.R.O's Revenge because I'm really into shooting games, and H.E.R.O's Revenge has got a lot more action than Pitfall does.
I would go with H.E.R.O's Revenge because Pitfall has a definite ending, and if you're really good, you can play H.E.R.O's Revenge forever. I mean, if that's your thing.
Oh man, I've got to go with Pitfall on that one. Slightly better crafted, more innovative graphics at the time. You know, a lot more things on the screen. It wasn't just black and a few things on the screen you're shooting at.
For me personally, I like Pitfall. I like the role-playing games better than the action shooters, so I'd choose Pitfall.
I would say it was a pretty good adventure game. You have to gather 32 treasures and to accumulate 114,000 points in a 20-minute time frame.
I would pick Pitfall in a face-off because Pitfall Harry is just this really cool, enduring console character. Very simple guy. The whole like sound effect of people swinging where you go la, la, la.
La, la, la.
It took about 10 minutes to design the game of Pitfall on a piece of paper. It then took 1,000 hours sitting at a computer to bring it to life.
The polls are closed, your votes are counted, and your choice for the best classic console game of all time is Pitfall! his hat on the top spot. Well, that wraps up this episode of Filter. Remember, the opinions expressed on this show are yours, not mine. So make your vote count on future episodes by logging on to the Filter show page at g4tv.com/filter. Until then, I'm Diane Mizota, and I'll see you next time.